So the topic today is reviewing evidence, and as I said, it's an introductory lecture. So I will just be introducing you to the tip of the iceberg, and let's explore the iceberg together. So before I present any lecture, this is the usual format that we follow. So we need to know who our audience is, and I'd sent you a Google form, which you very kindly had filled and sent me back. So I received overwhelming 92 responses. And so I gathered that my audience today is primarily postgraduate students. I don't know whether you are on your own here or your guides have just pushed you to attend this, but definitely let's enjoy it together. And we also have faculty members. We have our young faculty here, also our experienced faculty here. Some might be much more experienced than I am today, but that's what learning is all about. It doesn't matter what age, what experience you're in. It's just learning and sharing together. And I'd also asked you the topics on which you would be interested and what you're working on. So I'd received multiple topics, excellent number of topics. It's not possible to cover all those topics. So I have taken cue from those topics only. And I've just taken one of them, which I'll be explaining time and again during the lecture. Regarding the work that you have done, presently maximum number of people are yet to start working. So it's good that I am I'm catching you at a very early stage. I'm happy to see that some of you are already doing systematic reviews and a small number scoping reviews, which is, currently my area of interest very badly. So I'm going to take that too. And narrative reviews, yes, definitely many of you must be doing. And in fact, you are all doing it in your thesis, you're all doing it in your library dissertations. So it's a kind of literature review that you're doing. So we'll be covering that too today. So the strata today is PG students, young faculty, and experienced faculty. I do hope everyone takes back a share of experience today. So before I start my lecture, I'll introduce you to my team because as I always say that you cannot do research alone. It's always in a team that you do research. And it's as early as you formulate a team, you start doing very good research. And I think the person on the left side, Dr. O.P. Kharbanda, needs no introduction. He has been my guide, my mentor, and we've been working together ever since. The second photograph is Dr. Aman Chaudhary. He is a professor in oral pathology in my own institute. And Dr. Deepika Bablani, who's also a professor in oral pathology in my own institute. And, as you see that my team is comprising of different specialities. So it's very, very important that you have fresh perspectives to each topic that you take up. So formulate a team which is interdisciplinary, which has, fresh perspectives from different disciplines. So that's how we conduct research. And so prior to beginning my lecture, I am very happy to introduce my team. And I think Dr. Aman has also joined this lecture, so I'm happy that he's here. So the thoughts that I expressed in today's presentation, they are solely based on my experience and of conducting these reviews for the past so many years. I do not claim that I know everything about the subject. I will not be able to cover everything about the subject. But yes, we are here to learn together. So let's just continue with that. And taking that as a cue, we need to understand what is the kind of research, primary two kinds of research that we do. So one is a primary research. Primary research that all you postgraduates have entered the clinics and you have started doing patients and working upon the patients. That's the primary research that you are generating, that you are doing. And when you try to analyze that research and get something meaningful out of it, when you explore, which is the unexplored, that is the secondary research. The primary research definitely has all the strata that you do in your clinics, which can be original research, which can be experimental studies, cohort, case control, randomized control trials. And the secondary research can be, as I said, how you take meaning out of it in the form of systematic reviews, meta-analysis, or even narrative reviews. So that's a secondary research. And earlier when I joined my first year post graduation, and in the first year itself, they did a kind of a lecture on study designs. At that time, I just could not understand anything because we were very new to it. And primarily, the examples also sometimes that they take, because it was a common thing for medical and dental. So the examples that they used to take were of medical science. So I never used to understand, I could not extrapolate that into my own field. So ever since when I've started taking my lectures, I have started putting examples which are completely related to our field so that our students understand it well. I know that many of you have completely a fair idea of this study design, but let's just do a slight brush up before we go ahead. So as I said, that I'll be taking one example which has been given to me. It's a library dissertation from your own university, and it is basically on diabetes and periodontal disease. So I've taken that example, and I would be explaining these kind of study designs based on that example. So I've formulated a kind of a short story. Let's just go through it. So there's this patient, Mr. Gupta. He's 50 years old. And for the past 5 or 6 years, he's been struggling with his sugar levels. And he's a known diabetic, but sometimes he gets it in control, sometimes he does not. But of late, he's having a different problem. Now, he's having a lot of swelling in his gums, and whenever he brushes his teeth, they bleed. And people are not ready to sit with him because, he's having those halitosis and very bad breath. So now he thinks, okay, now is the time that I have to get myself corrected. Otherwise, I'm going to lose all my friends. So let me just go to the dental. So he comes to the dental OPD, maybe SGT University itself, and he gets himself registered in the perio department. So now the guide in the perio department, he refers the case to a first year postgraduate, very fresh, and now he's ready to take the history of the patient. So he's taking a complete history of the patient, and then he starts doing the clinical examination. He also notes the HbA1c levels, the sugar levels, because the patient has fresh reports, luckily. So he reports all that. And he also notices what is the gingival index, the periodontal index, the probing depth, the attachment loss, everything. He notes a very detailed, very nice history, and he takes it to his guide. Now his guide says, okay, now what we'll do is that let's control his blood sugar levels, and let's do a scaling and a route planning session, and let's follow up the case. So they do that, and then in 2 or 3 months time, they notice that they have very good results, and the patient is also following instructions. So the results are really good. So the guide tells this resident A that, okay, now since your case is so good, so why not publish a case report? So he tells him the basic structure, and then they publish a case report. So it's a descriptive study that they published. They described everything about the case. So they published a descriptive study. Now this resident A says that, ma'am, this is not the only case that I'm doing. I'm also having more diabetic patients in my OPD, and I'm treating them the same way, and I'm having good results. So now he says that, there is a slight variation in these cases. That's okay. So let's highlight it in the case series section. So they take 4 or 5 similar cases. They highlight what are the differences in that and the commonalities in that, and they publish it as a case series. So again, it's a descriptive study. But then they feel that, okay, since for the past 6 months, this resident A is so much interested in diabetes, so there must be so many cases coming of diabetes in the perio OPD. So let's go back 6 months and see that how much is the prevalence of diabetic patients in this perio OPD. So they do a kind of a prevalence study, a cross-section study. So they do that, and it's again a descriptive study. But then they also feel that, okay, let's conduct a very small survey. What is the awareness of the diabetic people who report to our OPD that they can have these gum diseases associated with them? So they formulate 4, 5 very easy questionnaire, even in local language, Hindi language, and they kind of float it amongst the diabetic patients, and they get the data. So that's a survey study, again a descriptive study. But now, this resident A thinks that, okay, since we are doing so many cases and we are getting good results, why not analyze this? So how do I do an analytical study? So he asks his guide. Now his guide tells him that, okay, we can either do an analytical study by an observation, you just observe it, or you can do a treatment and then you can analyze. So in the observational study, he says, okay, how do I do it? So the guide says, I think somebody's mic is on. Can you please put it off?
One second, Priyanka, I'll just look into this. I've muted him. Okay. Thanks, Jasmine.
Thank you so much. So in this observational study, now he says that, okay, if you're so much interested in diabetes, in the periodontal disease, why not you attach yourself to a diabetic clinic? And then you note that from the diabetes, how many people are progressing to the periodontal disease? So that's a case control section. Okay, he can do that. Then he can also do a retrospective cohort where he can go back and see if there are any associations with any other systemic diseases like hypertension or any other smoking habits or anything which are relating to the periodontal disease. So that's a retrospective cohort. The cohort is the same section of diabetic patients that he's looking at. Now he feels that if I'm looking back, why not go front? And those same diabetic patients, if I see what is the prognosis in that case and whether the pre-treatment sugar levels, are they governing in any way the severity of the disease or the prognosis of the disease? So that is a prospective cohort study that they plan. So now this resident has done quite a bit of work in first 1.5 years. Now he feels that, okay, I've done enough. Now let me progress to the clinical trial section. So he asks his guide, how do we progress to the clinical trial section? He says that you are doing approximately 2 major sections of patients. One are healthy patients, one are diabetic patients. And you are giving scaling and route planning to both. So why not devise it as a non-randomized trial? So keeping the age and the sex similar, you divide the patients into 2 groups in a non-randomized manner, and you give the same treatment and see what are the effects in the diabetics and in the healthy patients. So, okay, they do that. That's a non-randomized trial. But he says, how will I be sure whatever intervention that I'm giving to the diabetic patient is the best intervention? So for that, he takes the diabetic patients and he plans a randomized trial. Now, how do they plan a randomized trial? So for that, his guide tells him that first of all, go to the clinical trial registry. Whether you go to Indian clinical trial registry or you go to the US clinical trial registry, you have to register your trial, and they're also going to tell you which sections you have to register in. So what sections? Now, what trial they plan in that diabetic patients is that in one section, they want to give a pre-medication with antibiotics. In the other section, they will not give antibiotics and they will just give the route planning session. So, and they divide the patients randomly. How do they plan the randomization? That is by a random sequence generator. So the randomization is taken care of. Blinding is taken care of because neither the patients know that I am going to get antibiotic treatment or not. Nobody knows it. Neither the patients know, nor the operator knows. So it is complete blinding. The third thing that they say that there is no allocation bias. How there is no allocation bias? Because the random sequence has been generated by the random sequence generator, and a third person is allocating them to the 2 groups, and it is in a sealed envelope. Neither the operator can see nor the patient can see. So it is an allocation concealment. And then when they are following up the case to the prognosis, they will also see whichever patients do not report. So they will not have attrition bias also because they will be reporting the attritions. So they're taking care of all the biases in this randomized trial. And they find out, okay, antibiotic treatment, I'm just saying hypothetically, they find out that, okay, antibiotic treatment with route planning may be better than the plain route planning. But then this resident says, okay, this is we've calculated the sample size based on our OPD data, but how can we be sure that this is what the protocol is being followed all over the world? How do we know that all the clinical trials which are being conducted in this particular topic are being conducted in the same way and they have the same reports? So for that, now they realize that they have to generate from the primary research, they have to come to the secondary research. So they decide to take up all the studies and the clinical trials which have been done nationally, internationally, all over the world in all the databases and analyze the results and then come to one particular conclusion that this treatment, this intervention is better than simple route planning. So this is how they progress from simple primary research, all sections, to the secondary research. So let's see. So the resident A has climbed up the stairs very smoothly, step by step, and that's how we all should follow. We should understand all the steps and then go to the highest step. So in the primary research, they first published the case report, then the case series, then the case controls, cohort prospective as well as retrospective. They did the randomized control trial, and then they culminated all the data from all the randomized trials all over the world, and they did a systematic review. So this is how the quality of evidence is generated. But why would we need that? Well, as you postgraduates, you are on the first section right now. You are generating the primary evidence. You are doing work in your clinics and you are generating the primary evidence. And then from there, as we said, that you take that and synthesize that data and produce them as systematic reviews. Why would you need the systematic reviews? To formulate the clinical policy guidelines. Okay, let me tell you. This is an era of pandemic. So the information is pouring from all sides, from your grandmother nuskhas to all the reports that are getting published. It's an area of infodemic. But how do we know that, okay, this information is useful and that information is not? Like you can see, remdesivir was once, people were dying for it. So, and there is an ICMR report which says that remdesivir is not that effective and you should use it with caution. So that's their report. Ivermectin has just come up that it has decreased the mortality by 78%. Okay, now that is something which is going to govern the clinical policy guidelines, and that is ultimately which we are going to use in our clinics, which we are going to use in our practices. Let me give you another example. I'm an orthodontist. A patient comes to me, a growing child comes to me in a class 2 case, and I'm comfortable with extracting 2 teeth and taking the teeth back. So I give that option to the patient. Now the patient is very smart because he has already seen the internet and he has come to me. So he says, why have you not given me an option of growing jaws by functional appliances? Why don't you give me that option? So then I have to generate good quality evidence and show it to him that in your case, since your growth pattern doesn't permit, so we are not giving you this functional appliance, but we are giving you the extraction treatment, and this is the evidence supporting it. So now is an era of evidence-based practice. Your patients are informed, you are informed, and you have to give choices to the patient, whichever they are comfortable with, but only on the basis of sound literature evidence. And that too, you are going to generate in your own clinics and doing the good quality secondary research in the form of systematic reviews or meta-analysis. So let's go further. Oh, we are so tired. We have learned so much about the study designs and all. I'm not sure how much you recall it, but yeah. So let's go further. So what is a literature review? So when we talk about a literature review describes a published materials which provide an examination of recent or current literature. But the only catch is that the search here may not be complete. It may not be comprehensive. The appraisal also, there may be no quality assessment in that. And synthesis is primarily narrative and analysis is primarily conceptual. When you talk about a scoping review, well, I'm taking up only these 3 sections. Why? Because there are 14 different typology of reviews. It's not possible for us to cover all the reviews. But I'll be just taking the basic steps and you can apply them in all your reviews. So we are primarily considering literature review, scoping, and systematic in this particular section. Well, I was talking about scoping review. Now, what is the difference in scoping review? It is a form of evidence-based review, but it is to provide an overview of the available research evidence without producing a summary answer to a discrete research question. So it's a broad research question that we are looking into, and it's a broad scope that we are presenting. But when we talk about systematic review, now that is based on clearly formulated questions which use systematic and explicit methods to identify, select, and critically appraise relevant research and to analyze them from all the studies included in the review. So the only difference is that systematic review is completely based on very critical, clear-cut questions, and they will critically analyze all the evidence, which you do not do in all the previous reviews. So this is basically a checklist. So I'm very thankful to Mona ma'am. I had published this question on ResearchGate a few days back. Most frequently encountered problems while doing systematic reviews and their solutions. So this is the exact question that she has asked. Is there any checklist available for doing systematic reviews? Well, this is our own formulated checklist on the basis of which you can just tick, okay, you've done this step, you've done this step, and you can just, go through this process and then follow and do the systematic review. So the first is selecting a topic, which is very, very important. She had also asked this question that how do we select a topic? Now this is actually whatever answers that I give, some are based on definitely the literature evidence, but some are just based on the practical tips that I'm going to mention here. So selection of topic is primarily based on two conditions. One is a finer criteria and then the duplication aspect. So what is a finer criteria? A finer criteria is, and this you can apply in your thesis itself. So whenever you select a topic for your thesis, you can apply the same principles. It has to be feasible, it has to be novel, and it has to be relevant. All these three factors have to be there. If I today decide to do a systematic review on a condition which is obsolete, it is not going to have any effect on the healthcare interventions. So there is no point in doing that. But yes, if it's new, it's relevant, then only I should take up that topic. Okay, let's give you an example. That many people, they decided requests had come for this topic also that, okay, they want to do oral symptoms in COVID-19. Okay, regarding the feasibility, the factor is good because you have a lot of studies based on oral symptoms now in COVID-19. Is it novel? Yes, because it's a new topic. Is it relevant? Completely relevant in current times. But then the catch comes that we have to check for duplication. We'll be coming to that. We can take another example. When we talk about feasibility, if I wanted to do a systematic or a literature review or a scoping review on mucormycosis in COVID-19 a few months back, when it has just started, I would not be having any primary research. So I could not take up that topic. So you have to see this aspect also, the feasibility aspect also, that the studies, the primary research has to be available to be included in your review. When you talk about literature review, yes, you can include any kind of studies in that. You can include case reports, case series. You can include, like we studied the cohort studies, any kind of study designs you can include. But when you talk about systematic reviews, there are particular formats you have to include. So you need to see that those kind of studies, is that kind of literature present? But yes, now 3 months down the line, if now I want to do a systematic review on mucormycosis, yes, definitely it is feasible because I have primary research available for it. So otherwise, as postgraduate students, or if you don't have a topic in your mind, how will you start, from ground zero? From ground zero, how you can start it, that in your own particular, like in my field, these are the three main journals. You can choose, like in perio, oral pathology, anything. You can choose your three major journals and you can see which topic is getting repeated time and again in the last three issues. So definitely that's a new and relevant topic. So you can just outline major 2 or 3 topics and you can prepare this kind of a table for your guide to see which topic might be more interesting for doing a thesis or a systematic review or a literature review. It follows the same principle. So you can just outline, when you have outlined, okay, this is the topic getting repeated, take those 3 or 4 articles and you see in beneath the abstract, what are the keywords. You note down those keywords and you also note down what are the other words that they have used during the text and you write them in the related words. So then you take this topic. These are the 3 topics that I've outlined, which are repeating in my 3 issues again and again. So I will take these 3 topics to my guide and then let the guide choose, or maybe if I have interest in one of these topics, I will take up that topic. So this is how you take up a topic. But then the story doesn't end here. You have to check for duplication also. Okay? Because there is no point in doing a research which has already been done. And if it has been done in the past few months or maybe even 1 or 2 years, I don't think that we should be spending our research amount or time or effort on the same topic. So how do you take, when you check for a systematic review, where do you check? You check in Prospero or Cochrane. If you've planned a systematic review, so you'll first go to Prospero site. So kindly tell me if you can see the Prospero here.
We can see the Prospero slide, ma'am.
Okay, excellent. So here you can see this search button. First of all, please see that I've made an account in Prospero. This is my account. So I recommend everybody to make an account in Prospero. Whether you are a student, whether you are a PG first year, second year, third year, or a faculty, please make an account in Prospero. So here you go to search. Can you see the search?
Yes, ma'am.
So type diabetes and periodontal. Let's see if some results, they come. So yes, we have 225 records available in diabetes and periodontal. So then you must get disheartened. Okay, now I can't take up a topic in diabetes and periodontal. No. Again, there's a catch. If you have a topic like, that resident was trying to study, okay, the use of antibiotics in the diabetic patients, whether that's the best form of intervention for those patients or not. So if you have that kind of aspect in mind and it has already been done, you leave that aspect. You go to the prevalence aspect. You go to the prognosis aspect. You go to the treatment aspect. You go to the therapy aspect. There are so many different types of aspects that you can cover. It's not necessary that all the aspects will be covered in the systematic reviews, because systematic reviews don't work that way. They are not broad questions. They are very specific review questions. So if somebody would have registered a review in this, then it would be very specific. They would be considering only one aspect. Like I said, if there's a prevalence aspect covered, therapy aspect would not be covered. So you can take up that therapy aspect. So you have to see and explore whether the aspect that you want to study in that topic is already done or not. If that is done, try to change the aspect that you are studying. So that's how you check in Prospero. Actually, we usually take workshops on Prospero. So we also tell you how to search in Prospero, then how to go ahead of registration in Prospero. But that is because this is just an introductory lecture. The whole thing cannot be covered here, but yeah, that's covered in the workshop section. So let's go back. The other place where you would be checking for duplication in a systematic review would be Cochrane. Can you see the Cochrane website?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You can see the search bar here.
Yes, ma'am.
Again, you type the same thing here. Diabetes. And periodontal. Can you see here? There are
Yes,
5
ma'am.
Cochrane records also. If somebody has registered in Cochrane, even in systematic reviews, that is the highest level of evidence. So if the same thing has been registered, please do not take up that topic. But as you can see that, no, we cannot see the same topic that we were referring to. That resident A is safe because he can do that study because it is not registered in Prospero. So yes, we can go ahead like this. You can search any topic here like this in Prospero and Cochrane, but if you are talking about systematic reviews. Do we check for duplication in literature reviews also? Yes, we do check for duplication in literature reviews also, because all the time and effort is also required for literature reviews. So, when this topic came up that, okay, let us do oral manifestations or oral symptoms in COVID-19. So I just brushed through the Google Scholar and major database, and these are very beautiful articles that I could locate. So this is a narrative review which has already been done, and it is so recent. It's just in October 2020 that it has been published. So it's not that old. If you want to still do the same topic, then what I would recommend is that you can publish it as a small hot topic or an update, because till 2020 they've already covered all the aspects. So if you want to still do that, yes, okay, this new finding has come and I want to publish it, then you cannot publish it as a complete review because 90% of your part will be repeated from this. So you publish it as an update. That's how you do when you want to do the same topic, but at a certain gap of time. And when you feel that, okay, new findings have already come. But then somebody also might think, okay, this review article has been published, but it's a narrative review. So why not do a systematic review on this? So let's search for a systematic review. That has already been done. So oral manifestation in patients with COVID-19 living systematic review has already been published. It's a beautiful article. Just go through it. And it's even more recent. It's been published in 2021. So all the evidence that's available for oral manifestations is already here. And since it's an evidence base, so they're also suggesting clinical recommendations with it. So what I'm trying to highlight here is that since you've decided that you have to spend your effort and your time on some topic, it's very, very important that you spend time locating any research that has already been done on that particular topic. Please do not spend the time again on the same topic. That the first thing that we do when we start with a systematic review is formulating a team. As I said, I've already introduced my team, Dr. Kharbanda, Dr. Aman Chaudhary, Dr. Deepika Buglani. So we've been doing a lot of research together. So, but what are the basic components of your team? What should be the basic components of your team? This is not for literature review that I'm talking about, but this almost remains the same for scoping reviews and systematic reviews. You should have content experts. Now, if you've decided on a topic, maybe, if a topic is related to periodontal and diabetes, then content experts would be definitely periodontists, but you can also have somebody from endocrinology. You can include that also as a content expert because, your studies will be having some levels of sugars or some levels, diagnostic things which you might not understand that well as an endocrinologist, or the medical side person might understand. So it's always better to include them in a systematic review or in any review. Inclusion is always better than exclusion, because again, as I said, I'm again highlighting, it would give a fresh perspective to your topic, and it would also give a diversified perspective. Since they are best in their field, why not join with them? Let them come to your team and let them give their inputs. It will only strengthen your review. So content experts would be directly who are related to the topic, like in periodontitis and diabetes. Both the periodontist and the endocrinologist might be the content experts. Then method experts. Well, when I started the systematic reviews, nobody was doing systematic reviews. So I did not have that luxury of having a method expert. So we had to study everything on our own and formulate our own methodologies and do that. But now many people are doing it. we have formulated so many teams. So, when they call upon us, we give them our expertise for it. So you need to have a method expert by your side so that you don't go wrong, especially if you're doing it for the first time. But the second and the third time, you might get, comfortable doing it. So it's okay. Medical librarian, well, it's a very, very important thing which Indian universities do not have. We don't have that luxury, okay, that you just give a topic to the medical librarian. The librarian is going to formulate the search strategy, going to do the search, going to hand over the results to you, and even take out the full text for you. Everything that they do in the foreign universities, you have to do on your own. So definitely, it takes a lot of time and effort. That's why I always say that if you are spending so much in time and effort, please do not do for any duplicate topic. Language experts, yes, definitely, because we need to be very comfortable with English. That I don't think we have too much of a problem here in India. Statistician, yes, definitely. If you are planning to do a meta-analysis, or even if you're trying to include studies which have a lot of stats in them, please get it cross-checked by a statistician, which is very, very important. And reference management, well, this is an important aspect. And this is by my own personal experience that I'm telling you, that reference management software, as soon as the child enters post-graduation, please teach them reference management software within the first month itself. It is going to help them in every walk of life, from their protocol formation to their thesis, to any library dissertation, to even a case report. I'm saying even if they have 5 references in that, they should do it with a reference management software. It is amazing softwares that you have and they are free to use. You just need to get a hand on it. And if somebody teaches you, it's so simple that in 15 minutes, you will be comfortable doing it. And it will save you days and days of your time when finally you're doing a review. So this is something that I recommend for everybody. We take it in our workshops also, because we feel that this is the primary aspect that you should know even before you start doing any kind of research. And this will really be very fruitful to all of you. You can go for Zotero, you can go for Mendeley. They are both free reference management softwares, but you also have some paid ones like ReadCube, or you have EndNote and all. They're all paid versions. But when you have very efficient free versions, you can easily go through them. And you just need, yes, you need some hand holding for the very first time, and then you will be completely on path. And they also have some more benefits because they are directly related to the various databases. So you don't have to do anything. They will directly take up the citations from the databases. You don't have to add manually anywhere. And they can save all your searches and they can save the duplicates. Everything is available in this reference management software. So please, this I recommend for everybody, starting from case report. Please do it with the reference management software. Don't do it otherwise. So this is a very recent scoping review that we have published, and very thankfully that this is published in Nature Publishing for the very first time. We're very proud of this article. In 2021, this got published. And again, my team of Dr. Hamlan, Dr. Kharbanda, and Dr. Deepika, and we added in our team Dr. Kamini and Dr. Vikram Saini. They are from the lab, infectious biology lab of AIIMS. Because as I said, that inclusion is always better than exclusion in any kind of review that you do. And since we were doing a topic of exploring salivary diagnostics since COVID-19, and they are working in the type 4 diagnostic lab of saliva. So they are the best persons to tell us when we are analyzing the data, where we are going wrong. What are the CT values? What are the log 10 values? It was difficult for us to comprehend, in the beginning. But if you have people by your side and they're able to cross check every time that you write something and okay, this is correct, this is wrong. So you need that kind of content experts with you, and they differ in every research that you do. The content experts can differ because it is always based on expertise. If you see this is a topic which is related to definitely salivary diagnostics, but it is nothing related to specifically or specialities. It is not related to perio or ortho or oral pathology, or everybody has a contribution to make. But yes, definitely the review lab, the infectious labs, the labs which are working on the saliva, definitely their inputs become really, really important. So we added them in our team in this particular review, and this has been published very recently. The second thing after you formulate a team is that you have a very, very specific research question. So when you have a specific research question, how do you go about it? Well, as I said, that you have different aspects of research questions that you can study. If one thing has already been done, if the treatment aspect has already been done, please look at the prevalence or therapy or screening, any different aspects that you can do. But always try to formulate your research question very specifically based on population, intervention, comparator, outcome. Time is not that necessary, but yes, you should keep PICO format in your mind. So let's take this example again. Effect of systemic antibiotics on treatment of chronic periodontitis in diabetes patients. So this is the primary research question that I could think of related to that. So what is the question? Are antibiotics effective with scaling and route planning in chronic periodontitis patients with diabetes? So who are the population here? The chronic periodontitis patients with diabetes. They're the population. What is the intervention? Systemic antimicrobials are the intervention. Comparator, they have compared with no antimicrobials like our resident A was doing in his RCT. He was comparing giving the antibiotic in one section and not giving antibiotic in the other group. Outcome, they can do all the gingival indices, periodontal indices, the probing depth, the attachment loss. You can decide on your outcomes prior. The secondary outcomes also, like the risk factors associated with age and sex, you can decide on your secondary outcomes also. So how does this differ in the literature review? You might not be very, very specific about the research question in a literature review, but you have to be specific about the research topic. I'll tell you how it becomes so wide. Like I started doing a literature review on biomarkers in orthodontic tooth movement. Well, it's so vast that I was not able to justify in one literature review because there were so many different biomarkers to be considered. So the primary thing is that when you are trying to compile the data, again in the literature review also, it should make some sense. So for it to make sense, please be slightly specific in your review question. Like if you are doing something on diabetes and periodontal disease, and if you want to do a literature review, please don't do diabetes and periodontal disease. Take one aspect of it. I'm not saying you have to do an evidence-based search. If you want to even explain something, maybe you can just take the therapy aspect. So you just take one aspect. How do you formulate the title based on your research question? If your research question is, are antibiotics effective with scaling and route planning in chronic periodontitis patients with diabetes, then your title can be, you take the keywords from your research question itself. Title can be effectiveness of antimicrobials in chronic periodontitis patients with diabetes, and write a systematic review. You always have to write a systematic review. Why? Because that is the only way you are going to get cited, you are going to get looked upon when you search through the various databases. If you don't write systematic review, it will be considered as any other review, and you will not get that much of weightage or that much of citations. And you want citations when you have done so much of beautiful work. Why not get cited? So always write a systematic review after you've written the title. Registration in database, as I said, it's a very, very long topic, but yes, if we need to register, you have to go to the Prospero site. And as I said, I've already told you that please try to make an account in Prospero as soon as you can. And here, this is one section that you should know, that they have already said that right now they are not including scoping reviews in registration. So if you're planning to do a scoping review, Prospero is not the right site to register. They will only be registering systematic reviews during this time. Then the next question people ask is that can we only do the human studies in this? No, they also have a section of doing animal studies in this. So you can go and register your, this is a register your review section. And you can check all this. This is a checklist that they have prepared. I will also be giving you my own tips and tricks here. So register, you can decide here where you want to go, whether you want to go for the animal studies or you want to go for the human studies. So if you want to go for the human studies, you can just go through this protocol. We will be taking that in the workshops also. But yes, there is one tip that I have to give here. If you have already done the data extraction, many students, they come, okay, we have already made this chart. Now can we register? No. This systematic review can only be registered if you have not reached the data extraction stage. If you have just done a preliminary search, okay, you have looked upon the feasibility aspect, okay, some articles are available or not, you've just seen that, yes, you can register. But if you go beyond that, then definitely they are not going to take up your registration because half the work you've already done and it has not been registered. Why Prospero registration is a must is to maintain the transparency in your research. Because since you've already registered a protocol, you have to follow that protocol. You can't shy away from that protocol. And they are so extensive in your protocol. They have sections where they divide into participants, intervention, comparator, outcome, and you have to prepare separate inclusion and exclusion criteria for all the sections and maintain in your Word document. I completely recommend that please prepare Word document before you try to register in Prospero. You should be ready with the sections that they ask. You can go through a template form and you can prepare the sections beforehand. You can ask for our help also if you want. If anywhere you get stuck, we are there to hold your hand, as I said. There's no problem. But you have to prepare inclusion and exclusion criteria for each section separately. Participants, like in our example, participants are chronic periodontitis patients with diabetes. So the exclusion will be chronic periodontitis patients who don't have diabetes. That is inclusion exclusion criteria only for participants. Intervention can be antimicrobials. Then the exclusion can be no antimicrobials or some other, maybe the steroids that you're giving. So they can be the exclusion criteria. Comparator the same way. You have to prepare inclusion exclusion criteria for all the sections and maintain in a Word document. I'm telling you again and again, maintain in a Word document before you try to register in Prospero. So these are the tips and tricks, as I said, that you have to define inclusion exclusion criteria for all the factors of PICO. Yes, for all the study designs also. You have to mention what kind of study designs you're going to use. That also is a section in this. Like you have to mention if you're not taking case reports, if you're not taking case series. Okay, this also I have to tell you. You might ask that, can we do a systematic review on case reports and case series? Yes, you can do it. There are quality assessments separately for case reports, case series. But let me tell you, the kind of evidence that you're going to generate, even by doing a systematic review on that, will not be high quality. Because ultimately, you have to grade your evidence, and that evidence will not be high quality, even if you do the whole systematic review. You have to maintain a Word document with all the questions. Take help. Yes, this is important that if the similar systematic reviews, slightly related also, you can for the first time take help from that also, and you can go through their inclusion and exclusion criteria and see how they have written, and you can follow the same protocols. You have to decide the quality assessment criteria prior. As I said, that if you are taking case reports, you have to mention the quality assessment which is related to the case reports. You can't mention any quality assessment criteria. So that's very, very important. Okay, this is one factor, registration in international database, which is not present in scoping review. Scoping review, if you want to register, you can register in other formats like Open Science Framework and all, but that's not that mandatory. And it's definitely not mandatory for literature reviews. So if you're doing it for your own thesis or something, you might not register it. But yes, if you want to publish it as a systematic review, definitely you have to register in Prospero. How to search is then definitely, you take keywords. So these keywords work on Boolean terminologies. What are these Boolean terminologies? These Boolean terminologies are and, or, and not. Like here, I'm showing you an example of and. We took that example of periodontitis, diabetes, scaling, and antimicrobials. So we joined everything with and. Why? Because we want all these 4 sections or concepts to be there in the articles that we choose. So you see, these are the 4 circles, and this is the area that we are going to study, because it has to be overlap of all the 4 sections. We will join by and. You can ask, where do we use or? Or will be used if you want to expand your search. Like if it is diabetes, and some articles have used, instead of diabetes, they have used the word sugar levels, or they have used diabetes mellitus, or they've used any other terminologies. Then you can expand your search by or. Keep on adding or. The green section is going to get wider and wider. In periodontitis, again, you can have many other names also, like periodontal disease or any other disease, gum disease, anything. So you can just start expanding your blue section by adding or. Again, scaling, other words can be prophylaxis or any other thing. So expand your orange section by adding or. Antimicrobials can have other names like antibiotics or anti-inflammatories or anything. So you can expand your yellow section. So that's how you expand your search. The search is also another broad topic which can only be covered in a specific time, because then you need to know the concept. Okay, there was another terminology of not that I mentioned. That's another Boolean terminology that we work upon. We don't usually use it in our search, because then it will exclude all the concept or all the criteria that you have mentioned in not. Like if I want to say not maybe any other if you don't want to study, if you only want to study diabetes and you don't want to study hypertension, so you want to say not hypertension. But then if some studies would be having diabetes also and hypertension also, then all those studies will get excluded. So my suggestion and my personal experience is that please don't use not. You can expand your search based on and or, and this is how you expand your search. Okay, very interesting. We need to know the terminologies of MESH, which is medical subject headings. And as soon as we enter our post-graduation, we are from medical side, we need to know what are medical subject headings. These are few points that I feel that all the postgraduates should be exposed to within the first month of their entry into the post-graduation. What is MESH? It is medical subject headings. It's a language which is used by PubMed. It's a beautiful concept, because as I said, that if you start searching for words that, okay, somebody has used diabetes, somebody has used sugar, somebody has used diabetes mellitus, you keep on adding it manually, it will be a big task. So MESH has entry terms on it. You just take the MESH headings and it will include all. You don't need to manually enter all the terms if you have a medical subject heading available for that topic. We can take it up as a separate time, because again, it has some limitations, some strong points, but definitely MESH is the, if you use MESH in your keyword strategy, it will definitely help you in your database search, especially the PubMed search. So where to search is, you can look through major 3 databases, PubMed, Scopus, Web of Science. There was another question that was asked. Okay, from the last slide, this is very recent actually, because I keep on reviewing articles also related to systematic reviews. So I don't know, because this comes blinded to us. So yesterday I have reviewed one article which has come from a reputed journal itself. But there somebody has written a search strategy, because you have to mention your search strategy. And on the bracket, very conveniently, they have written MESH. And believe me, they have used 8 words in that search strategy. They have used 8, and the bracket for all the 8 terminologies. I will not be telling you the terminologies, but they have used MESH, and not even one of them is MESH. So what I'm trying to say is, whatever you do, be very honest, because you're going to get caught here and there, anywhere, and it doesn't reflect good. So MESH is a specific terminology. You can easily go through it and see if it's present or not. Please don't falsify the data like this. This was just another personal experience that I shared. Okay, for the database search, again, people had asked that we don't have access in our university. So where we can look for the databases? Well, then for that, you have to create a network. Like, as I said, these are the lectures and the workshops that we are conducting for diversifying ourselves, for broadening our network. Again, we have started a WhatsApp group also for this very purpose to help each other out. In our university, we have Scopus, we have Web of Science. So we offer you that service, but we don't have Embase with us. PubMed is free for us all. Embase is present in PGI Chandigarh. So if you have connections there, you can easily go to Embase you can easily go to PGI Chandigarh for it. But these are the few databases that you must have in your search. Please don't use Google Scholar. It's a kind of a gray literature. Please don't use Google Scholar because it gives you a very wide search and you will not be able to reach anywhere. Gray literature can be, you can also go to the thesis dissertation site, OATD, you can go to the clinical trial registries, as I said. So this is gray literature. Gray literature is the one which is not in specific academic formats. Your thesis that you're producing is a very good form of gray literature. The library dissertations that you're producing is a very good form of gray literature. And I sincerely request all the major universities like SGT University to prepare a central repository so that that is available for all. And even if we want to search good quality research in your repository and we want to include it in our systematic reviews, we should be having access to it because that is again going to give you recognition, give you citations, and that is, I think that's what you want. Snowballing the search is again, you have to, keep on building upon your search. You've seen a snowball rolling down have you ever seen, you've been in snow? So if you roll down a small snowball, by the time it reaches down, it becomes a very big snowball because it's going to attract all the snowballs again with it. So that's the same way you build your search. One is a search strategy. You do a database search, you do a gray literature search, but then you also look through the references and build upon your search. That's how you do the snowballing. And this remains same for all the reviews. Even in literature reviews, I would recommend be as comprehensive as possible. Please don't take one section and, okay, I'll leave these articles because I'm tired now. No, don't do that. Please mention some basic criteria that even if you have used in literature reviews. Don't do literature reviews also haphazardly. Do a comprehensive search because even a literature review will have a lot of impact. Like I showed you the very good literature review on COVID-19 and oral symptoms. So the same way, I'll also be just mentioning their material methods also. You can use them in your literature review. You can use them in your the review literature of thesis that you do. You can use them in your library dissertations also. So this is how it gets, compiled. My tips and tricks here that take time to formulate a search strategy. You have to link to the search to the reference management software. As I've already highlighted that Zotero Mendeley you should learn in the first month of your entry because anything and everything that you search. One more thing. Please I've told you, make an account in Prospero. The second thing that I'm telling you, please make an account in PubMed. Because anything that you search in PubMed, if you have an account in NCBI, it automatically gets stored. You don't have to go again and again. Okay, the next day again you see that, oh, my history is not there. If you have an account, your history will be stored and you can use it as and when you want. You have to maintain dates of your search. I would recommend it for all the reviews, definitely for scoping and systematic, but also for literature review. A broad date that, yes, this is a literature review, which tells you the literature till March 2021 or April 2021. So please write a basic date also in your literature review. I recommend this again for your library dissertation, for your review of literature of your thesis. When you present your thesis finally in your final exam, and on the top of it, you've already written that this search I've applied and all the references that are available till this date are available in this particular section. And you've already done the data extraction, you have presented in a tabulated form. Just imagine what impact it would have on your examiner. He would be bound that this child has done everything possible in his thesis. So please try and maintain the review of literature section in the same way. You write a basic search above, write a basic date above, and then formulate a tabulated section. Like I'll just give you an example. So formulate a tabulated section and maintain like that. And please do not copy paste. Do not plagiarize, do not do anything, because again, as I said, that it is a gray literature that you're producing. If I want to include your thesis in my systematic review, and I come to know that it is completely plagiarized, then I would not be including it. So do good quality research, start early and start ethical, and that is how you're going to contribute. You should not have a gap of more than few days between the search. So if you're doing a database search on 3 databases, please do not have a long gap, because many articles will get added. So preferably all the databases have to be searched within a gap of few days, and make best use of MESH terms. That's what my take here is. Prisma is preferred reporting system of systematic reviews and meta-analysis. This section definitely is exclusive for scoping and systematic reviews. You might not include it in literature reviews. But this is how you do. You first identify the articles, then you screen the articles based on your titles and your abstracts, and then you look at the full text and ascertain the eligibility based on your inclusion and exclusion, and finally you include. This is how your table is going to look like. So identification, in the identification, you have all the major databases and you know how many results have come. From there, you have already done the screening and duplicates have been removed. Then you do the screening based on titles and abstracts. And here in this section, you have already written the exclusion criteria, but this is only done on full text. So for all the full text also, you have to have a very good network. Sometimes what happens is that we try to locate the full text and we are not able to find the full text. Are all the the sites which we are very comfortable with, the Russian sites where we get all the free text, full text, are not working because they have stopped working on full text. So then you have to locate the authors, you have to mail them, you have to ask for their full text. Even if they don't reply, then sometimes you have to look for a common connection. Okay, you know this guy, please tell him to respond back to me. So that is how you maintain a network, and that becomes very, very important when you are looking for databases or you're looking for full text. It works everywhere. And then finally, you include the articles. This is the flow chart that you prepare. So maintain raw data of each file, even for identification, for screening, for legibility. You have to maintain an Excel data file and you don't have to lose it, because your journal can ask you anytime. It's a raw data that you have to maintain, and please try and share it with all your co-authors, because they can edit it, they can view it anytime. And if some query comes, everybody can put their minds together and work upon it. Maintain exclusion criteria at each step. Define the exclusion criteria, again, as I said, for PICO, and you have to follow that in Prisma. Prisma checklist also, this just has to, these are the set of questions that you have to answer. Once you prepare the manuscript, this comes at that time, because you have to write it has been reported on this page number. This can be taken up separately. Quality assessment tools, yes, definitely. Systematic reviews, this is one section which is optional in scoping reviews. If you want to do, you can do. But if you are, clear, because you have to present a broader scope and you want to include all kind of articles, and you don't want to exclude the articles based on the study designs or the quality, then you can omit quality assessment in scoping, but you cannot omit it in systematic reviews. You can omit it in literature reviews, you can omit it in scoping reviews. These are the various tools that are available. You can go through this very beautiful article if you want. It has all the tools that are available for the risk of bias assessment or the quality assessment. And for the resident A was doing a randomized control trial. So for the systematic review, he has to use the ROB Cochrane tool. But if I'm doing a diagnostic study, I can use a FODAS tool also. Again, risk of bias is a huge topic and we can cover it separately. Bias can enter in two forms in a systematic review. One is if you are including garbage in your systematic review, if you're including low quality studies, if you're including studies which have a high risk of bias, then definitely the output is going to be a very low quality systematic review. But you can, apart from the bias in individual studies, you can introduce bias in all steps of systematic reviews. That is why I have mentioned everywhere how you have to maintain transparency. And I've also always in all steps mentioned tips and tricks which can avoid this bias every step. It is called meta bias. Data charting. Well, once you have collected all the data, then how do you do the charting? I'll just show you one glimpse. You can maintain the charting like this. This is the chart that we prepare. You see, article link, author, date, study type, single or multi-centric, number of participants, age of participants, initial diagnosis, patient clinical situation. So we've divided it into different sections of, again, author date is must. Then the participant criteria, you can choose how you want to classify. So we have maintained this Excel sheet like that. And if you want to study the intervention, then you can maintain criteria for intervention also. Maybe if you're doing orthodontics, you can maintain like the force levels, or you can maintain the type of orthodontic study design. You know, you can formulate your own data extraction chart. And let me tell you, this has to be available. The headings have to be available at the Prospero registration time only. So you have to prior decide that you are going to extract the data in this many sections. You can modify it slightly later on, but the major sections have to be the same. So this is a kind of chart, just showing you an example that this is the kind of chart that we prepare for every scoping or systematic review that we do. And this is shared amongst all the authors, because we keep on adding, or anything that they have to mention, that they mention it like the section here. So this is a very comfortable working chart. Then when you have to synthesize data, it becomes so simple that we have to synthesize it. Now you just take one section and you synthesize the data in this section. You have to synthesize this, you take the data in this section and you synthesize the data. So this is a very, very handy, workable chart. So this is this data synthesis. You can do it qualitatively, you can do it quantitatively. If you want to do it quantitatively, it has to be meta-analysis. So if you have some studies which have values in it, like, again, as I said, orthodontic force levels, or maybe some millimeter movements that you have, and you want to compile the data, then you can do a quantitative assessment in the form of meta-analysis. Otherwise, you can generate the synthesis in the qualitative manner. And when I talk about literature reviews, then it has to be completely qualitative only, because you are going to mention all the aspects qualitatively in a conceptual format in a literature review. Like I said, if it's a quantitative, then this is a Cochrane. This is basically a forest plot. How do you read a forest plot? This is a line of no effect. You have to include all the studies that are homogeneous, or if it's an heterogeneous study, then you have to have the random effects model. So basically, it's beyond the scope of this particular lecture, but you just need to understand, if you're reading an article and this forest plot comes, then what does it mean? It means that this is a line of no effect. These are all the studies that are included in this particular systematic review. The size of this box is going to tell you how much is the weightage of each study in this particular meta-analysis. The lines are going to tell you what are the confidence intervals. And this particular diamond is going to tell you what is the actual result. If it is this side, if it becomes on the right side, then it favors the control section. If it becomes on the left side, it favors the intervention section. So it is read like this. Even the Cochrane in its logo has a forest plot. And it was a very important and a very old meta-analysis that they had done. And this is very important because they had mentioned in this meta-analysis that if the preterm babies, the mothers are given corticosteroids, then it can improve the life expectancy. And that is the one that they have used in their own logo. So just to give you a brief overview. How you can synthesize the data better? As I said, once I showed you those chart, and you can just take one column of that and you can synthesize the data qualitatively. But you can also augment it with the various visual illustrations, like we use it in all our. These are our own studies that I've mentioned. So this is the first illustration that we had done in our scoping review recently that we published in Nature. This is one which we have done in forensics, in salivary signature and forensic profiling. So this is a kind of a flowchart that we have prepared. This is a mind map which we've recently started using because it becomes very, very handy to explain any kind of concept to anybody. So don't think that you're doing a systematic review, so you don't have to explain anything. You just have to put the facts. No. Anything that you present in a manuscript form has to be readable. If it's a literature review, if it's a scoping review, if it's a systematic review, if it's a meta-analysis, anything, if it's not readable, it will not be accepted by the readers. And to make it more readable, to make it more comprehensible to the readers, you can, illustrate various flowcharts, various diagrams, various mind maps, so that the concept becomes more easy to understand, more palatable for the readers. So then we have last is dissemination. Yes, you have to prepare a manuscript, you have to prepare publications, and that's where you actually get recognition. So publish, circulate, and get noticed. I will just be winding up very soon. So these are a few of our systematic reviews and meta-analysis that we published. I started in the year 2014 with Dr. Krabanda, Dr. Nitika Monga, and even Rajeshwari ma'am from biochemistry was there. Then we did a meta-analysis. We had a researcher from CSIR who had associated with us. These are very beautiful articles and very high citation factors and impact factors. Then again, on enzymes that I've done, this is another review, a literature review that I've done, but it is based on the principles of systematic review. But yes, I have not included quality assessment, or we have not included the Prospero registration in this. So that's how we've done a literature review also. So how is a checklist done? For scoping reviews, as I said, these are not mandatory. Protocol and registry is not mandatory. Quality assessment is not mandatory, but rest of the checklist remains same. But I'm sorry, this is not a scoping review, but this is a literature review section. You can exclude all. You might not formulate as extensive a team, but definitely one person should not be doing a literature review. You should have 2 or 3 people doing it. You have a broad review question. You can search with keywords, but data extraction, data synthesis, and dissemination remains the same. So this is again a review article, as I said. So this is what they have. They have a research question, they have a database, they have a time frame, they have language mentioned, English language, they have Boolean logic, they have exclusion criteria. So try and maintain at least the blue section in your literature review, or your review of literature in your thesis, or any literature review in your library dissertations and all. Please maintain this. These are the differences in the literature scoping and the systematic reviews. Time to broaden, you can disseminate and connect, like we've diversified. This is an article by me and Dr. Aman, and we've done it in forensics. Library signature. So we have diversified, we have attained these skills, and we have used it in multiple dimensions. This is not primarily related to either my subject or his subject, but we have diversified ourselves. So this is how we diversify. We've also done library diagnostics, as I said. We have done in saliva and COVID-19. We have produced an emerging hot topic again. Then we have again used mind maps. So we have used our skills that we have obtained, and we have diversified a lot. This is how I've disseminated. I hold workshops nationally, internationally, and lectures. And the take home here is that you need to understand the differences, as I said, between scoping, systematic, and literature reviews. And in the terms of speed, methodological detail, risk of bias, and comprehensiveness, definitely scoping review is the must, but no review is of low importance. Even a literature review done well will hold a lot of importance in the research quotient. Reference management, yes. PubMed search basic, yes, within first month of PG joining the post-graduation. Boolean terms, yes, and data charting, yes. These 4 things definitely you must know. You can apply it anywhere and everywhere you want. For students, the take home is you can use it for library dissertations, review of literature and thesis, plan good quality primary studies based on it, understand the study designs, perform some basic research, and concept of evidence-based research you should have. And you should know how to read the evidence-based articles. That is the only reason why I showed you that first plot also. For the faculty, you have a lot of advantages. You can plan the good quality studies for yourself, for your students, understand the study designs, database. You can guide in the evidence-based search. You can form teams within your own institute or inter-institutional. You have a hang on the relevant softwares like the reference management softwares or the RevMan, the meta-analysis softwares. So you can, upgrade yourself to those relevant softwares. Side by side, you will not realize what all you have strengthened. We have strengthened scientific writing. We have strengthened critical thinking. We have strengthened our citation matrix. We know how to put them on various academic social networking sites, how to get citations. That's also an art. And then again, we have strengthened our IPR section because we've also sent our chart. I published a mind map for scoping reviews, which is a very extensive mind map, and I've sent it for copyright. And once I get a copyright, I'm going to publish it, and it's going to be available to all of you. That is just a kind of an extensive checklist, and it's also kind of a guide that you can just follow those principles, and you'll be able to do any kind of review in a very good manner or good quality. Possibilities are that yes, you can formulate evidence-based journal clubs, you can form teams, you can peer review the research. You can send us for peer review also. Database access network. As I said, networking is very important. Full text retrieval groups. And you can also respond to the clinical trial raw data requests. So yes, these are the future possibilities. Trainings, yes, you have some trainings which are available in Prospero, Cochrane, or Professor B.D. Moses. We also hold workshops. So in that, we cover the Zotero, or we cover the PubMed search, Prospero registration. Also, we are planning to cover the risk bias. So this is all that I had to give you today. And this is a question that I have put. If anybody wants to go and wants to answer, I've already in the form that I'd circulated a WhatsApp group also. If you want to join that, you're most welcome. So this is all our experience and all our expertise that we've shared with you. I hope that it really helps, and questions are really welcome. So thank you so much for a very, very patient listening. I think I'll stop sharing.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you,
ma'am.
Priyanka.